see. These are pivotal chapters in the book of Ecclesiastes, because up to this point, Solomon has played the part that he wanted to play, where he is talking about the meaning of life. Life under the sun without God is like dust in the wind. It's a breath, vapor. It sounds like a song. He's been saying, I went out to try wealth, I tried fame, I tried power, I tried women, I tried wine, I tried song. He tried everything for the meaning of life, and he came up empty every time. And he knew he would. But he had to make the effort. He had to, in order to do the test, you had to go all the way, with each thing. And he did. Now, not that that was right for him to do it. It wasn't. It was wrong for him in each one of those areas. But he felt like he had to push to the limits. And he's very honest about it in the scriptures here, telling us about. Imagine writing down a journal about your experiences in all these areas and then telling the whole world for ages to come about it, all your inner feelings. Is wow. So why did he do that? Because God told him to. That's why. And for us. And one of the things we have to remember is that this is inspired by God. All Scripture is inspired by God. So it comes to us. God wanted this published. God wanted us to read this. And the conclusions he comes to are inspired by God. So this is truth. And I read a lot of things where people were talking about, well, Solomon didn't know what he was talking about. This can't be right. Well, then it wouldn't be in Scripture. Okay? It's in Scripture, so Solomon came to some good conclusions we need to learn from. That doesn't mean that everything he said at the beginning is right, because he says it wasn't right. He said, I tried this, I tried that, it didn't work, it's all pointless. Okay? Now in chapter 7, 8, and 9, he comes to a pivotal point where he starts to talk about eternal truth. He's still talking about everything under the sun and what we experience under the sun. And if you look at life from a humanist perspective, we're just going to do this, we're going to do this, you're going to come up empty. And he keeps saying that. And he puts out there a lot of sayings, traditional sayings, that we think these things are new. They're not new at all. They were already from way back, okay? They were old to him. And he brings out these sayings, and when he says the saying, he's not saying that's true. He's saying, let's talk about that. And then he brings an eternal perspective to it. So now in 7, 8, and 9, this is the first time he's actually starting to bring out some spiritual, eternal perspective to things. And the biggest thing he wants us to understand is attitude. One of the men that used to teach at FBC used to say, you got to have an attitude of gratitude. He's right. But our attitude needs to be more than just thankful. We need to have a perspective on life that needs to be changed by God. There's no way we can change it on our own. You can't just do better. We need to be totally, radically changed by God. So that we have a perspective on life, that we understand that life as we know it is pointless. It's useless. It's vanity. You're going to come up empty. And if you try to find logic and rationale to the universe outside of God, forget it. You're going to come up empty. And that's why mankind has not been able to come up with that definitive statement of what is the meaning of life. Outside of God, there is none. And so in 7, 8, and 9, he's going to be going through a lot of these traditional statements, and he's going to give the other side to it. Now, if you go in any Christian bookstore or semi-Christian bookstore, you're going to see a lot of paintings, pictures, framed wisdom that you can put on your wall. And there are certain things that people will say that people will buy that. That sells. Okay? But we're going to see in what Solomon says here that the first half of a statement might sell. But it's the second half that we need to look at. The second half doesn't sell. People ain't buying that. But that's where the truth is. And that's going to be on a number of occasions. Now, it's kind of hard to put these chapters together, and I will not be able to give you everything that's here. Okay, you're going to have to really study this out on your own. We're just going to hit some highlights, okay? Reading through Ecclesiastes is not like reading one of the stories in Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John, okay? It's not like that. It's not like the narratives of the Old Testament where you learn about the life of Moses or something. No, this is a whole lot of talking, whole lot of teaching on a whole bunch of stuff. Okay, but the main thing that he wants to talk to us about is our attitude that we need to have, first of all, wisdom. That's one of the biggest things Solomon talks about all the time because God gave it to him, and he understood not using it, and he understood using it. So we need to have wisdom. We also need to have humility, and that's really the big one. If you talk about the number one thing in Christianity, attitude we need to constantly be working on is the attitude of humility. It's the attitude that showed in Jesus Christ that you see in Philippians chapter 2, right? He came as a humble servant. God himself came as a humble servant and demonstrated humility in every way, in his attitude towards the Father, his attitude towards his disciples, his attitude towards his parents, to the rabbis, everything. Humility. If we could learn humility, you'll say, well, that's too much to ask. Well, then why did God constantly say, humble yourselves under the mighty hand of God? Why does he tell us that? He doesn't say, ask me to humble you. That's a dangerous thing. That's like saying, God, give me patience. Oh, he will. But there's a way we learn it. It's learned. Humility is something you have to decide you want. So he says, humble yourselves. We have to decide we want that every day of our lives. We crucify ourselves daily. We say, I'm dead to the world for God. I'm alive to Christ. I put on the mind of Christ. I'm going to think like Christ instead of like me. I'm going to deny myself and live for him. That's humility. Because as soon as you put him before yourself, you're going to put everybody else before yourself too. And we need to live that way. And when we do that, we can learn to be content in whatever God does. Whatever his plans are, he's sovereign. I'm not. I'm humble. I'm going to let him do what he wants. I'm going to let other people do what they have in their lives, and I'm going to be content with that. Paul says, I've learned that secret. It's a secret. It's not easy to find. Contentment in every situation. So let's start to look at this. Chapter 7, he starts out with a number of sayings that we need to grab a hold of, but one I want to point out in verse 8 before we even start. Look at verse 8. The end of the matter is better than the beginning. You understand that? How you finish is more important than how you start. How our life finishes is more important than how it starts. How I end the day is more important than how I start the day. My attitude at the end of the situation is more important than my attitude at the beginning of the situation. Do I learn from it? Do I let God do something in me? So he says, the end of the matter is better than its beginning. Patience of spirit is better than haughtiness of spirit. This is basically the tortoise and the hare. At the start of the race, the rabbit said, I'm winning this race. I'm faster than you. Da-da-da-da-da. And the turtle's like, I'm just going to keep walking. I'm not fast, but let's go. It's the end that counts, right? And sometimes we get all proud and arrogant. We think we can handle anything. Be honest. There are days you wake up and say to yourself, I'm the greatest Christian that ever lived. I am more spiritual than my husband. I'm more spiritual than so-and-so's husband. I'm more spiritual than the pastor any day of the week. I'm more spiritual than all my children today. People are going to learn from me today. Now, maybe you don't say that every day, but there are days we say that, don't we? And we set out to demonstrate greatness to the world. And 10 minutes later, do we learn from it? Do we learn from that? It's better at the end. So, do we exhibit patience? One of the characteristics of the fruit of the Spirit, patience. Do we let God teach us so that at the end of whatever happened, see, this is not a poster you're going to find at a store. All right, nobody would buy this. Okay. But it's the truth. So this kind of explains what's happening throughout the 3 chapters. Okay, this is what he's talking about. Wisdom, humility, and contentment. So he brings up a whole bunch of situations to talk about. Okay, good name's better than a good ointment. It's very true. Reputation is big. You don't have a reputation at the beginning. You have a reputation at the end. That's better than ointment. The day of one's death is better than the day of one's birth. What? Everybody's born, everybody dies. But we're all born the same. We're not all the same when we die, are we? What's more important? It's better to go to a house of mourning than to go to a house of feasting. Now, the funny thing is, a lot of the things he says in this chapter almost contradict what he said earlier on. Yeah. He's supposed to. Okay? Because earlier on he was talking about, here's human philosophy under the sun without God. Right? Better to do this than that. This is what everybody says. Now he's coming to the point and says, want to bet? So now he's starting to say, here's what's really true. So he says, it's better to go to a house of mourning than to a house of feasting. Not that it's bad to go to a house of feasting, okay? But there's more to learn. It's better for you. Because that is the end of every man. Very true. And the living takes it to heart. So when you go to a place where people are thinking about the end of their life, the important things are what really matters. They learn from that. On the other hand, you could go to a party where everybody's happy and nobody's talking about anything important. Nobody cares about what's important. They're all making mistakes. So which one's better? Why do we always choose the other one? We can all get together and have a wonderful time and accomplish nothing. Sometimes it's better to get together and have a serious time and accomplish something. Sorrow is better than laughter. For when a face is sad, a heart may be happy. Very true. You can be going through difficult times and have a sad face and still be content and joyful inside. The mind of the wise is in the house of mourning, while the mind of fools is in a house of pleasure. It is better to listen to the rebuke of a wise man than for one to listen to the song of fools. No, when he's talking about fools, when he's talking about people that all they think about is having fun, pleasure, that's it. He knows because he did it. Okay, so he says that's fool. That's being a fool. You're not thinking about what's true, what's important, what's real. All you're doing is have a good time. And that's where the church has started to live. What pleases people? What do people want? Let's have what people want. But God said, no man seeks after God. So if all you do is give people what they're looking for, you give them nothing that they need. We have to be careful of that for ourselves, that we don't look for something that isn't what we need. It's better to listen to the rebuke of a wise man than for one to listen to the song of fools. For as the crackling of thorn bushes under a pot, so is the laughter of the fool. And this too is futility. You just put a bunch of weeds under a pot, thorns, small branches, you're not going to make that pot very hot. It's not going to cook anything. It gets things started. It looks good. Not cooking anything. So is the laughter of the fool. And this too is futility. Verse 7, for oppression makes a wise man mad when a bribe corrupts the heart. People use bribery to get things done, but in the end it does damage. The end of the matter is better than its beginning. Patience of spirit is better than haughtiness of spirit. Do not be eager in your heart to be angry. What does that mean? Are you ever eager in your heart to be angry? Boy, I wish I was angry. No. What does it mean? Don't be in a rush to get angry. Don't be quick to be angry. Why? For anger resides in the bosom of fools. Verse 10 is one that gets us. Do not say, why is it that the former days were better than these? Oh, I wish it was the old days. I remember the good old days. No, we all say that different times, don't we? Why is it that we always latch on to certain things that I liked that? What's the danger? What's wrong with that? Well, because then you're telling God he shouldn't have done what he did. God, you made me get older. That was wrong. God, you made this the 2000, almost 20, instead of the 19, whatever. I like the 50s. Then God should have just frozen humankind into the 50s? Is that what you're saying? No, God made things change. Why did he make things change? Things are going in progression. They're going in a certain direction. Why is he doing that? It was like be like taking your child. You know, I have 2 wonderful grandchildren. They're better than yours because they're mine. Anyway, they're my grandchildren, and I love them. And I would love to. There are certain times that you really like that age. You know, it wouldn't be great if they just stay that age. You know, little Riley, she's gonna crawl pretty quick, like any second. Like, don't crawl. I just want you to stay a baby, and because I like that age. You know, because once she starts crawling, she's dangerous, right? Then we have to move everything and all that. What would be wrong with that attitude? Because God didn't create her to be there for me, to just look at and say, oh, you're so cute. Okay, that's part of it. But he created her for eternity. You think about this? God gave you your children not so you'd have a kid. I know you think it was for you. Okay, no, he made that child because he wanted someone for eternity, for a life of eternity for them. They're going to worship, serve him or not. Okay, whatever reason he created them for, it was for him. You get to enjoy that for a time. But it's not about you. You get to be a part of it. See? And if we look at people and we think, if only, or a time, or the way things used to be, and we say, oh, it was so great back then. Okay, then God was wrong to let it change? Obviously not. God has a purpose. He has a plan. He's doing things differently. And we often tell God, God, you shouldn't have done that. You should have made it stay the same. I liked it the way it was. We did, didn't we? But no, God's got something different, okay? So do not say, why is it that, so don't let me ever hear you say, the good old days. Okay? Don't let me hear you say, I liked it better when, because I don't care. For it is not from wisdom, see, God even said it, it's not from wisdom that you ask about this. Some things are better not asked. Verse 11, wisdom, along with inheritance, is good, and an advantage to those who see the sun. So, wisdom is helpful. You might have an inheritance. Well, without wisdom, it's not good. Verse 12, for wisdom is protection, just as money is protection. But the advantage of knowledge is that wisdom preserves the lives of its possessors. So, wisdom is a very important thing that needs to be an ingredient in the cake of your life. If you don't use that ingredient, you're in trouble. Verse 13, consider the work of God. That's a good thing to do. For who is able to straighten what he has bent? Another great plaque for the wall that you'll never see in a store. Okay? Consider the work of God, for who is able to straighten what he has bent? There's a lot of times that we want to straighten out God's bent whatever. Okay, God, why did you break that? Why did you make that crooked? I like that in the King James. It says, what God has made crooked. Right? When God makes something crooked, do we look at it and say, God, why did you do that? Yes, we do. And the writer is telling us, don't do that. Consider the work of God, and if God has done that, don't try to fix it. I am a fixer. Most men are fixers. Right, women? You go to them and you tell your husband, here's the issue. You just want a sympathetic ear. You want them to care about your pain. They just like, okay, how do I fix it? But I had a hard day with this, and so, does it work now? I just want to fix it. We wish we could do that sometimes with what God does. God does things in our lives, and we go, I don't like that. I got to fix that. Maybe you're not supposed to. Maybe it's supposed to be bent. You won't find that plaque. Verse 14, in the day of prosperity, another plaque. This one definitely you will not find in any store. In the day of prosperity, be happy. But in the day of adversity, consider God has made the one as well as the other. So that man will not discover anything. I love this part. So that man will not discover anything that will be after him. In other words, God does it just so you won't know. Okay, God does the good things. And God does the bad things. Well, you call them bad. He doesn't. Okay? God does all those things. And you don't know what he's doing with it. That's the point. You don't know. You're not supposed to know. If you always knew, you'd be God. We can't figure out, but I can't figure out God's plan. Right. You don't like that answer? That's God's answer. That we don't know what he's doing. Verse 15. Okay, now he's going to go back to some of our attitudes again. Here's some attitudes that we have about what's going on with that we don't like that God does that. Verse 15. I've seen everything during my lifetime of futility. There is a righteous man who perishes in his righteousness, and there is a wicked man who prolongs his life in his wickedness. Do not be excessively righteous, and do not be overly wise. Something's wrong with that picture. Why should you ruin yourself? Do not be excessively wicked, and do not be a fool. Why should you die before your time? It is good that you grasp one thing, and also not let go of the other. For the one who fears God comes forth with both of them. Or you say, whoa, what is that? Well, in the beginning he says, here's what troubles me, he's saying. And it troubles all of us. There's a man who's living righteously. And he dies. Comes to an end, whatever. And there's this other man who's very, very wicked. A la Hollywood, whoever. And he's doing great. What's up with that? What did he just say before that? Don't try to figure out what God's doing. Okay? God does things just so you don't know. Is that okay with you? Get real. Is it okay with you? We have to get ourselves okay with the fact that God's doing things we don't get. He has purposes and plans. You can think of some people in the Bible that were very, very wicked. And God did not strike them dead. He let them live. And sometimes their lives turned around. Good thing for you and us, you and me, right, that God let us get turned around. He didn't strike us with lightning when I was 3 years old. I didn't die, right? Because he could have. Didn't do that. But I can't figure out his plan, and I should not try to figure it out. We become judges. This is where judging comes in. We become judges of other people, and we think we know better than God. God, you should have struck them dead. Not very loving, first of all. Second of all, we're putting ourselves in God's place. God says, I am the judge. Vengeance is mine, saith the Lord, not yours. Let me figure that out. So, first of all, not true. Second of all, there's nobody righteous. Okay, so he even says, all you self-righteous people, who you are right now, judging everybody else. Okay, he says, let's not be too righteous, in quotes. Okay, because what were the Pharisees doing? Pharisees were ruining their lives by this huge list of things they couldn't do and wouldn't do, and you shouldn't either. Sometimes they're called Baptists. Okay, we can be that way, can't we? We can figure out for God where everybody else is. Let's rank each other on our spirituality from 1 to 10. Don't do that. Okay, don't. He's saying, don't go there. Is what he's saying. You're going to ruin yourself. The one who fears God comes forth with both. There's advantages in both directions. We need to fear God. Wisdom, verse 19, wisdom strengthens a wise man more than 10 times who are in the city. Indeed, there's not a righteous man on earth who continually does good and who never sins. So you're not it. Also, do not take seriously. Oh, this is another poster you won't see in the store, but we should. This could avoid a lot of conflict for us. Okay? Verse 21, do not take seriously all words which are spoken, so that you will not hear your servant cursing you. For you also have realized that you likewise have many times cursed others. Oh, that's convicting, right? Don't worry when you hear other people saying bad things about you. Don't overreact and don't think you have to go fix that because you did it too. Right? I don't hear any amens. True, isn't it? Yeah. Great wisdom here. Verse 23. I tested all this with wisdom, and I said, I will be wise, but it was far from me. What has been is remote and exceedingly mysterious. Who can discover it? I directed my mind to know, to investigate, to seek wisdom as an explanation, to know the evil of folly and the foolishness of madness. And I discovered more bitter than death the woman whose heart is snares and nets, whose hands are chains. One who is pleasing to God will escape from her, but the sinner will be captured by her. He's not really talking about a woman there. He's talking about the woman of non-wisdom, foolishness in the world that traps you. And he knew that because he was trapped, wasn't he? Many, many times. And he uses the woman metaphorically because that's what he got. He trapped himself with that one. Verse 27. Behold, I have discovered this, says the preacher, adding one thing to another to find an explanation, which I am still seeking, but have not found. I have found one man among 1,000, but I have not found a woman among all these. He's just speaking what he knows, okay? In other words, where was he looking? He was looking for a righteous man that he could trust. He said, out of 1,000, there was one. So I looked through all the women, he says, I didn't find any. We know that's true for him because he kept looking. He kept marrying them. Never found one that helped him. He was looking the wrong place, wasn't he? Verse 29, behold, I have found only this. Another sign you will not find. Behold, I have found only this, that God made men upright, but they have sought out many devices. A lot of people blame God for their problems. God's fault. What does he say? He says God created men perfect. Adam and Eve, right? God created Adam and Eve with no problems. They were perfect. It was good. But what did they do? They sought out trouble. That's what he means by devices. They sought out trouble. So he says, I've come to that conclusion. God made man perfect, but they have sought out trouble. Now we come to chapter 8. We're not going to spend a lot of time in chapter 8 because chapter 8, basically he's saying, okay, now let's talk about this when it comes to the government. When it comes to the government and rulers and the king specifically, you could get yourself in a lot of trouble. So what do we need to learn? There's wisdom. There's humility. Oh, what would the third one be? You were sleeping. Wisdom. Contentment's the third one. Okay? So when it comes to the king and your response to government, my attitude should not be one of, oh, I got to change that. I got to fix that, just like chapter 7 was talking about. I have more wisdom than them. Oh, God, what are you doing? Why are you letting them? That king's not righteous. Why are you keeping him on the throne? Why do you let that? No, I got to fix that. I got to tell everybody else about it. No, he says same thing's true. Wisdom, humility, contentment. So the Bible tells us very clearly that who ordains leaders? God does. So if someone's in charge, is it my problem to fix that? No. Is it my job to change it? No. This is why Paul doesn't challenge Nero. No, it just wisdom, humility, contentment. So no matter how wicked my leaders are, it's not my job to change that. My job is to be wise, humble, and content with where God has me. Because my job is to focus on living for God. So there's a number of ways he talks about that in chapter 8. Basically gives good advice on how to avoid the wrath of the king. Here's how you avoid the wrath of the king. Live wise, humble, and content. Verse 10, he talks about futility of life, or people that live in where he sees wicked men seem to thrive and righteous people going through difficulty because of the king, and comes up with that same conclusion. So he says in verse 15, kind of his conclusion to all that. So I commend pleasure, for there's nothing good for a man under the sun except for to eat, to drink, and be merry. And this will stand by him in his toils throughout the days of his life in which God has given him under the sun. So even humanly speaking, even without God, just humanly speaking in response to the government, to the king, it's better for you to just enjoy your life. Don't make trouble. Enjoy what God has given you. It specifically mentions his wife, enjoying his life with her. Verse 16, when I give my heart to know wisdom and to see the task which is done on the earth, even though one should never sleep day or night, I saw every work of God. I concluded that man cannot discover the work which has been done under the sun. Even though man should seek laboriously, he will not discover. And though the wise man should say, I know, he can't discover. So if somebody who you think is the wisest man on the earth, and you go up onto the top of the Himalayan mountain to go find his wisdom, and you say to him, what's the answer? And Solomon says, he don't know. He hasn't found it. Solomon said he didn't find it. He said he worked very hard to find it. He couldn't find it. Without God, forget it. There's no answer. So live for God. Now, we're coming to chapter 9. He's still coming to that same conclusion. The biggest overriding conclusion of all of this is we don't know what God's doing. The biggest complaint I hear from Christians is, I don't know what God's doing. As if there was an answer I could come back with for that. There's not. The answer is what Solomon says here. We don't know what God's doing. Okay? You never will. Till we all get to heaven. Then we'll figure it out. Each day we'll figure out a little bit more. It'll dawn on us every day. Oh, that's what that was about. And that will be glorious, won't it? So don't fret if you don't know what God's doing. Chapter 10, verse 1. For I've taken all this to my heart and explained it that righteous men, wise men, and their deeds are in the hand of God. Man does not know whether it will be love or hatred. Anything awaits him. It's the same for all. There's one fate for the righteous and for the wicked, for the good, for the clean, for the unclean, for the man who offers a sacrifice, and for the one who does not sacrifice. You mean the prosperity gospel doesn't work? If I do this, or I tithe, or I do this, I send in this, or I make a sacrifice, then God's going to do it? No. No. As the good man is, so is the sinner. As the swearer is, so is the one who's afraid to swear. This is an evil that all that is done under the sun, that there's one fate for all men. Furthermore, the hearts of the sons of men are full of evil, and insanity is in their hearts. That's true. Throughout their lives. Afterwards, they go to the dead. Everybody dies. For whoever is joined with all the living, there is hope. Surely a live dog is better than a dead lion. There's another plaque you won't find. Notice it doesn't say cat. Anyway. For the living know they will die, but the dead do not know anything, nor have they any longer a reward, for their memory is forgotten. Indeed, their love, their hate, their zeal, gone. Doesn't matter. They already perished. They will no longer have a share in all that's done under the sun. Now, remember, under the sun is the key thing there. He's saying, without God, it's all the same. Doesn't matter. Okay? Go then, eat your bread in happiness, drink your wine with a cheerful heart, for God has already approved your works. If he didn't, it wouldn't happen. Let your clothes be white all the time. In other words, don't be in sackcloth and ashes thinking that's going to change things. Okay? Don't go around fasting to change God's mind. Not supposed to do that. Purpose of fasting is what? Repentance. There you go. It's all about your heart, isn't it? Let your clothes be white all the time. Let not your oil be lacking on your head. Enjoy life. Oil was for sign of joy. Okay? Enjoy life with the woman who you love all the days of your fleeting life, which he has given to you under the sun. For this is your reward in life. What's your reward in life? Enjoy what God's given you. Contentment. Wisdom. Humility. Contentment. That's your reward in life, in your toil in which you have labored under the sun. Your work, your toil is your reward. We don't think of it that way, do we? No, it's part of our reward from God is we get to work. We get to do that. We won't understand that till we get to heaven and we get to work in heaven. Whatever your hand finds to do, do it with all your might. For there is no activity or planning or knowledge or wisdom in the grave where you're going. So do it now. I again saw under the sun that the race is not to the swift, the battle is not to the warriors. Don't put that on a painting, no one will buy it. And neither is bread to the wise, nor wealth to the discerning, nor favor to men of ability, for time and chance overtake them all. Doesn't make any difference. You can't predict. You might think you got it all planned out and everything's going to be great. What does God like to do with people's plans? Woo! Want to bet? Right? Why does he do that? Because you're not God. Okay? He wants you to trust him, not trust yourself, not trust your plans. Trust him. A little frustrating, isn't it? Verse 13. Also, he keeps, oh, great, more. Although I came to see as wisdom under the sun, and it impressed me, that this impressed him. This is something that impressed him. What was it that impressed him? See if you can figure this out. There was a small city with few men in it, and a great king came to it, surrounded it, constructed large siege works against it. Probably was him that was coming against the city. But there was found in it a poor wise man, and he delivered the city by his wisdom. Yet no one remembered that poor man. So I said, wisdom is better than strength, but the wisdom of the poor man is despised, and his words are not heeded. The words of the wise heard in quietness are better than the shouting of a ruler among fools. Wisdom is better than weapons of war, but one sinner destroys much good. So he saw some things happening. One of the things we learn from this is he was impressed by this humble, wise man that saved an entire city because he spoke wisdom. But what was their response? They forgot all about him. They didn't care. So that encourages me to understand that we don't live for the crowd, do we? We don't live for the praise. We don't act wisely so other people will see it and recognize it. Because if we do, we're going to be disappointed. Solomon was impressed by this man and what he did, yet nobody remembered the guy. And he's saying, that doesn't mean don't do it. That doesn't mean don't be wise. That wisdom is important. But you also have to understand that the crowd doesn't care. The world doesn't care. And that should not stop you from doing the right thing. Because it's between you and God. It's not between you and the people. That last statement of chapter 9 is a very important statement because Christians ought not let this happen among us. And that is, wisdom is better than weapons of war, but one sinner destroys much good. One bad apple, it's true. It's in the scripture. Okay? All it takes is one sinner to harm all the good people are doing. Which is why God gave us ways to deal with that, didn't he? And it also should impress on us the importance of we ourselves not allowing sin to come into our lives because it's going to hurt everybody else. You can have a whole family working to accomplish something good, and just one person in the family goes against that, it can destroy everything. You can have one company working like crazy to make a profit and do something. It only takes one employee to throw the whole thing out the window. What we do for God is important, not only as individuals, but as a church. And we have to be aware that one person sinning can damage that. And so God has told us how to handle it. It matters. Most importantly, throughout these 3 chapters, Solomon is saying we need to have an attitude of wisdom, that wisdom is more important than all these other things. Our humility, we need to make ourselves humble. God says, make yourselves humble in my sight. Humble yourselves. And then be content. with where he has us. Well, I don't want to be content. I know. I don't want to be content. God knows that. That's why he tells us to humble ourselves, because we can't be content if we're not humble. We constantly want something else for ourselves. Maybe we ought to stop thinking about ourselves and think about others. Because God's got me here for them. So that I can have wisdom and humility and contentment that can influence them. But what if they don't care? It's okay. It's all right. Do we trust God? Well, I did up till now. Now I don't know. No. We can trust him because everything he says, he will do. Remember those things you said at the beginning of the service. All those reasons we can trust God, and we should. Let's pray. Lord, thank you. Thank you for your word. Thank you for reminding us through Solomon's experiences that we are not you. We're not God. We don't know the future. We don't even know today. So help us to be wise in using the information you've given us about yourself. Help us to humble ourselves constantly that we might serve you with that wisdom. And give us contentment that we would accept what you've given to us and use it with joy and gladness. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.